And welcome to the Resume Strategies webinar. My name is Chris Miller. I am the WSU Global Campus Career Advisor. Thanks for joining to discuss resumes, resume strategies, tips on how you can improve your resumes, things to watch out for, and some resources to utilize as well to help you in preparing for a job application. Um, if you've attended one of these before, you know I usually start by taking a look at the career development process. And tonight we are taking action. We are firmly in the orange section here. We are utilizing the main job search tool, the resume. So we've already analyzed ourselves and we've explored options and we've made decisions and got focused. And now we're doing it. We are submitting resumes and we want to make sure our resume is as strategic and as well put together as it can be. Okay. A little bit of history, just to give you some background about the resume. The person who is credited as creating the first one is Leonardo da Vinci in the late 15th century. Excuse me. It comes from the French word meaning summary. But Leonardo da Vinci was traveling around Europe, visiting different estates, visiting nobility in Europe, and just basically sending out letters that really focused on the needs of the Duke and not on just putting down all of Leonardo da Vinci's achievements on a piece of paper, but really just focusing on how he could solve a problem for the Duke. So he had the right idea, and I think that's one of the ideas, or that's one of the reasons why over the centuries we have identified his as the first resume because it was strategic, because he did the right thing in identifying, what you should be doing with a resume. But really, for the most part, for the next 450 years about, it wasn't that. It was just information on paper, a mere description of a person, including their abilities and past employment. In the turn of the 20th century, resumes listed things like weight, height, marital status, religion, things you wouldn't see on resumes today. It was not until 1950 that the resume evolved into something that was more than words just written on scraps of paper. By that time, resumes were considered very much mandatory and started to include things like personal interests and hobbies. It was not until the 1970s, the beginning of the digital age, that the resume took on a more professional look in terms of presentation and content. And in the 1980s, you had things like background checks becoming more standardized and easier to perform with technology. The use of fax machine, so you'd have fax resumes sent around. People would submit VHS portfolios, VHS tapes, and send those around to companies. That's interesting. And obviously now things are, for the very most part, digital, electronic, and using digital resumes and e-portfolios, personal websites, video resumes, digital video resumes, and things like LinkedIn, which I will discuss today. Some of the misconceptions about a resume, or resumes in general, I should say, is that it is the first impression. Well, sometimes an employer puts up roadblocks. I should say often, not sometimes. Employers put up roadblocks to prevent a deluge of people reaching out to inquire about getting a job there. They put up these barriers, these roadblocks to make sure, well, for a number of reasons, but when you have the opportunity to connect with someone first, you have a much higher chance of securing employment, of having a successful job search, of getting that interview. And that is the whole purpose of a resume, is to get you an interview. So hopefully it's not your first impression. Hopefully you have connected on LinkedIn, at the very least, with someone who's in that decision-making circle. Another misconception is that every job should be listed. The idea is to use it like a super resume, and that is a recommendation that I would say for LinkedIn or an e-portfolio, or not necessarily the personal website, but LinkedIn, or also just having a version saved that you can pull from when you need to. But you don't need to list every job that you've ever worked. It should really be a targeted document that is strategically focusing on those skills and experiences that you have that really speak to that job posting. One page for every 10 years of experience was the old industry standard for a resume in terms of length. But I'll talk about in some general pointers why that's not really the case anymore. And also, mostly that it's the most important piece of your job search. And like I said, it is the way that you get an interview is by, you know, having a strategic, well designed, and tailored resume. But really, you are the most important piece of your job search. And if you know someone ahead of time, it's not your first impression, you've networked, there's a good chance you'll even move ahead in the process, even if it isn't your resume isn't the best version that it could possibly be. Some general resume pointers is one leading in. This refers to two different things. So, one, that top section of your resume, that top 1/3 physical section, is if it is a first impression to your resume, to that employer that is looking at your resume to consider you for a job, that you really want to make sure you have tailored that top 1/3 section, since that's the first thing they're going to see. So if it is, that first impression scenario, even if it's not, they're going to pull that up, making sure that's the first thing that pops on screen. Should really be really well tailored to that job posting. And I will share a resource with you later on to help you figure out how to do that. The other part of leading in means within each section. So for work experience sections or for a skills section, what is that first bullet point that you're leading in with? It should be the thing that is most important to that job based on the information that you have from a job posting. And again, I'll provide you with a resource later on to help you figure out how to organize that. Resumes should have numbers on them, so you should have data to quantify your experience. So numbers, percentages, number ranges, any way you can get actual numbers on, not spelled out, but true numbers on your resume, because eyes are drawn to those. Like I said, the length, the old industry rule was one page for 10 years of experience, but really it's about knowing your audience. So if you're applying to a job on Indeed or LinkedIn, a large job posting board, an open posting board that everyone can access, those jobs are likely getting hundreds and hundreds of applicants. So brevity usually works best in those cases. Whereas if you were submitting an application and a resume for a federal job on USA Jobs, they want as much novel information that's relevant that you can provide them. So they're accustomed to and would like to see a 5-page resume, as long as that's all useful information that helps make your point as a solid candidate for that role. Font size between 10 to 12 points. It should be easy to scan through, basically utilizing some of these other pointers. But you don't want large blocks of text. You don't want paragraphs of text. You don't want full first person sentences. You want to be consistent in how you use punctuation, listing dates reverse chronologically, and verb tense usage. You just want to make sure you're being consistent throughout the entire document. I'm not saying there's a right way and wrong way to necessarily do that, but just you're listing resume phrasing. You're not writing full first person sentences, so punctuation is not. It's not an English composition document. It's a resume. You're using phrases. So just be careful and consistent with how you list things. You want to avoid repetition. A professional summary section is recommended, especially if you are a career changer or if you're going to something entry level, where you can really highlight transferable skills and experiences at the top, again, leading into the top. So, you have your name, your contact information, and then a professional summary, something that summarizes all your experience at the top, that's really targeting those keywords and points from a job posting. You want to be consistent in listing dates, reverse chronologically. So not just in your work experience, also throughout. So I know a lot of people, when I'm reviewing resumes, I'll see that they do that for work experience, but then they don't do it for education. And they'll list like an AA degree first and then a bachelor's degree. You want to list whatever you're doing presently first. And then remembering to include locations. Sometimes people forget to include locations on there, especially if you are looking in your geographical area. If you're looking at like a more national or international search, then it's less important to have your location on there for the jobs you've worked at, is what I'm saying, not necessarily in the contact info. And I'll talk about that in just a second here. You want to build a clear theme by highlighting. I mean, ideally, you'll have a clear theme because of your work experience, but that's not always the case for college students. They're finishing up a degree and going into something that they don't have experience in. So you can build a theme by, again, highlighting transferable skills and experiences, saying, I've done this in the past. I haven't done this specific job, but these are my experiences. That's how this experience translates. That's how this specific skill translates. With contact info, you want to have your name, you want to have a phone number, just one email address, and then your LinkedIn URL that you've tailored. You've removed all the extra letters and numbers, which is really easy to do in the LinkedIn help functionality, just search functionality, go into the tools and enter tailor my URL. And, so it's going to be more like linkedin.com/your profile name instead of / your profile name and a bunch of random numbers and letters that are just, auto-generated to create a unique profile. And that's all you need. Like I said, location, if I'm looking in my physical area, in my geographical area, looking for a job, then sure, I'll put, Seattle, Washington on there. I don't need to list my street address. I don't need to list my zip code. But I would consider leaving that on there. You don't really need to, it's really depends on the space you have and how you utilize the space on your resume. Ideally, you have the opportunity to submit your resume in a PDF format, unless they request it in a very specific way. There are usually fewer issues on the uploader side. Who should review your resume? So I am a resource for you as a Global Campus student. I'm here to review resumes, and I would be giving you just general resume strategy feedback. In terms of content review, what I would recommend, I can give you some content review, but really, there's a strong likelihood that I don't know the industry that you're pursuing. I don't know the job that you're pursuing. So, I can't give you the best content feedback. I can really tell you what makes a resume strong strategically and what doesn't. We have a resource now that I'll highlight in a little bit called Cougs Connect, where you can try to connect with someone who has WSU ties, who has volunteered to provide resume feedback for someone pursuing a career in their career area, which is really cool. So as many people as you can, just, to get information, get feedback about, what works and what doesn't on your resume. There's no absolutely right or wrong way to put together a resume, and people that review resumes for a living will have differing opinions on what does and doesn't constitute a effective resume. So some resources to utilize to help you develop your resume content. I'm going to show off the WSU resume packet, where to find that. Resume Worded is the resource that I'm going to recommend for you while you're thinking about how to organize things. How do I organize things within sections? What should I be focusing on? How do I put my professional summary section together? Resume Worded is the tool that you're going to want to use for that. And then tonight, I'm going to go over the Occupational Outlook Handbook to show you ways in which you can use the information in there to help you build your resume. So just bear with me for a second while I share my browser screen here. You can get a drink of water. So I'm going to move my Zoom bar. Let's start at the beginning here. ascc.wsu.edu, the main academic advising and career advising website for the main WSU campus. As I always say, there's great career development information here for any WSU student at any stage of their career. Under the Build Career Skills drop-down menu tonight, we're creating a resume / cover letter. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to scroll down. There's going to be an intro section. where you can see a resume guide right there, a curriculum vitae guide. There are sourced third-party articles and also articles written by WSU career development professionals. These ones would be mostly relevant to resumes, as we're in the resume section. Getting out down to the featured resources, this is where you'll find your resume guide for Cougs and your resume examples. So you can go ahead and check those out to help you with like developing that resume content. And I'll have some other tips for helping you do that as well. There's an updated version in there right now. I'll highlight the previous one when I discuss cover letters to give you an idea of what it looks like. It looks a little bit different now, but I think this previous version is just as good and is a little less distracting than the current digital one that we have. So I will do that in just a second. In terms of utilizing the Occupational Outlook Handbook, BLS Dev got /OOH. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the Bureau of Labor Statistics website for the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which used to be an actual book and now is housed here. And it gets its name because it is forecasting the outlook for jobs throughout the next 8 to 10 years about. So Occupational Outlook Handbook, that's how it gets its name. It's an excellent career researching tool where you can look at these different occupational groups on the side to look at like job clusters and industry. You can look alphabetically. You can simply use the search bar at the top, search handbook. I like to play a little OOH game where I refresh my browser until I find something that's relevant, that's more relevant for a global campus student. Emergency management directors could be automotive service techs, mechanics, bus drivers, library techs and assistants. It is not survey time, Mr. Labor Statistics. We do have people interested in library careers, training and development managers. Here we go. So this would fit in the in any management, HR management student. Here's some training and development manager information. I'm going to view the profile. And for any job or general job cluster that you're going to look at here on the Occupational Outlook Handbook, it's going to start with a summary. Kind of pulls everything together. But what do they do? What are the duties for this specific job? They plan, coordinate, and direct skills and knowledge enhancement programs for organization staff. They oversee training and development, assess employees' needs for training, align training with the organization's goals, create and manage training budgets, and so on and so on and so forth. You can see all this information, all this jargon to help you build your resume. If you don't have a job posting to build off of, because I'm going to recommend that you utilize AI as a idea generation tool. If you don't have a job posting to plug in to compare and contrast your resume or your cover letter with, where are you going to get that career information to compare your resume to? This is where you get that information. This is what a job posting for a training and development manager would have, things like this. So you can use this information to help you build the content of your resume. Work environment, less relevant for this. How to become one. This is going to work a lot for building your resume also. But how to become one, what education is required? Most of them will require a bachelor's degree, but some require a master's degree, as it says here. What are the important qualities, business skills, and what does that mean? So again, this is that information you can use to help build your resume. Business skills, collaboration skills, communication skills, so on and so forth. All this information would be great to help you build your resume content. And like I said, cougsconnect.wsu.edu is our newer mentorship platform hosted by the WSU Alumni Association. So I would definitely recommend getting in there and building your profile as a student and seeing what kind of potential mentorship opportunities are already out there. This is a somewhat newer tool. I believe it launched in the fall, so it's still being built on, but I already know that there are at least, I think last time I went in, I think it said 800 plus profiles in there already. So maybe there's someone in there right now who is doing the job or is in the industry or company that interests you, and you can connect with them and ask for, career advice and a resume review if they have identified that's something that they're willing to do, because that is part of building a profile for the mentor side, is figuring out how do I want to contribute. So that's Kooks Connect. Definitely check that out to help you with your resume feedback. Jumping back over. Another other ways to help you develop your resume content, something called the ethos method. And that is what stands for E for experience, T for tasks, H for how, which is the behaviors that you would utilize, O for outcomes, and S for skills. So whenever you're thinking about your work experience at a specific place, what was the experience? So contextually, what were you doing? What were the tasks you had? How did you complete those tasks? What behaviors? What were some outcomes? So you can get some data in there. And what skills did you utilize or develop in that role? You can ask yourself the big four questions. Did I deal with money? Did I work with customers? Was I involved in decision making? And was I involved in supervision of any aspects? So those are the big four questions to help you develop resume content, and to think about ways to quantify your work. Like I've said, what was the quantity of your work? What was the quality of your work? What was the impact of your work? And what was the scope of your work environment? So really thinking about how can I get those numbers, number ranges and percentages in there, thinking about those for developing resume content. Some common mistakes from resumes. These are kind of like when you highlight the things that the pointers, the successful things for a resume. Highlighting the common mistakes is kind of, not doing those things, but not having a LinkedIn profile with your contact information. And it doesn't have to be LinkedIn. It's just the easiest way to do it. It can be your own, I've seen many people with their e-portfolios, their own personal websites they've designed. Anything where, someone who is reviewing your resume for a job posting can say, if I want to know more about this applicant, I can click on it right there to see potentially some examples of your work. So that's one of the great ways that you can utilize LinkedIn or an e-portfolio, is saying, I'm looking at this piece of paper, online that's explaining some work experience, but can I go to their LinkedIn page to see some examples? So that's a really nice way. Like I said, you can use it as a super resume where you can put all your work experience there. You can pull from when you're creating a more targeted resume, and you can start collecting recommendations and things like that also. So not having that would be a big mistake. Not, leading in with the most relevant information. Yeah, I didn't get to resume worded yet. I need to go back. Not having a professional summary if that is a good fit for you. So like, if you're someone who has a lot of work experience in an area and you're pursuing that, you don't necessarily have to have a professional summary section if there's not space for it on your resume. It's always a good idea to kind of highlight stuff up front in the beginning. But there are spatial issues to consider as you're putting together a resume. If you have an objective section at the top, those are outdated. You don't need an objective section. It being too long of a resume, it being too short, again, for that specific audience. It lacks an appropriate format. You're writing full first person sentences. There are typos. You haven't run your spelling and grammar check before, converting it to a PDF. You're only listing duties instead of, with work experience, you want to highlight a blend of accomplishments, responsibilities/duties, and skills developed. And another common mistake is listing references on your resume or writing references available upon request. That's just taking up space that you don't need to provide them that information. If they want to hire you or find out more information for you, they will ask for your references. Cover letter. So this gives me a good opportunity to jump back and also highlight resume worded, which I somehow missed. How dare I? Just a moment. Jumping back over. Let's go back to ascc.wsu.edu. Oh, we're already in the resume section. So why don't I just scroll down a little bit further to see resume worded. Resume worded is an excellent AI tool that you should use every time before you submit your resume and cover letter for a job application. It is basically a compare and contrast tool. And this is the resource I would recommend you utilize when you're figuring out how do I organize these points of my resume? Which skill should I list first? What should I have in that first bullet point? What should I be focusing on with my professional summary section? It's a simple tool where you will copy and paste in the job posting, and then you'll copy and paste in your resume and cover letter, and it will compare and contrast. It'll show you what they're focusing on with the job posting and how well you are addressing those needs, requirements with your application material. So you should definitely do that every time. Familiarize yourself with Resume Worded or a tool like that. Like I said, if you don't have a job posting, you can use something like Occupational Outlook Handbook. You can use something like Labor Market Insights, where you're pulling that career information in, explaining what the job is like, putting it in there as a job posting, and then comparing, contrasting your resume to that to see where else could I be focusing my efforts here on my resume. So definitely check that out. But also go back to the same resume page at ASCC where the resume guide is and the resume examples. I'm going to highlight the previous one just because it's a little simpler, but it'll discuss different elements for your resume you could have. Again, this is the WSU resume packet. It would give you information on how to write bullet points. It's going to take an approach similar or more similar, but more boiled down than the ethos one I talked about. It's going to be the CAR approach, which is going to be context, action and results, or challenge, context, approach, action, or results. So to think about, again, setting the table for your work experience. What was the context? What did I do there? What were the outcomes? And it gives you some examples on some prompts to help you think about how you can explain your work experience, and some examples on ways that you could highlight that. It's going to have a nice list of action words here just to help you avoid repetition and think of different ways of saying things that are relevant. It's going to talk about these NACE career readiness competencies that all employers are going to want, regardless of academic discipline. These are areas they want all college graduates to have focused on at their time during their time in college, in ways that they can translate that on a resume. So some of them are more technical skills, and some of them are more social skills. And the section that I wanted to focus on for this part was cover letter. And sometimes I'm asked, do I need to submit a cover letter with my resume for a job application? And the answer for me is always, if you're given the opportunity to do so, that's an extra opportunity for you to provide more detail about your work experience, to provide more detail about why you're a good fit for that role, to help you get that interview. Of course, if they are requiring it with a resume, definitely submit it with a resume. But just to give you an idea of the makeup of a cover letter, this is a very formal, I would say, old way of doing it. You don't have to have your address and the address of the company or the direct address of the HR professional. But what you should try to do, so you can, remove this top part here and just leading in with dear name, and ideally you'll have a name. But the first part, what is your intent in writing the letter? What position are you applying for, and how did you learn about it? So you want to briefly introduce yourself. If you're aware of that specific opening, refer to it. If you're not, state your area of interest, more like a letter of interest and a cover letter that way. It can also be used to refer to the individual who recommended you to that organization. So any way that you can get that reference in there, that's fantastic if that's possible. That's really all you're doing in the opening paragraph. In the second or third, the body of the paragraph, the middle, what are your qualifications? Why do you want to work for the organization? What would you enjoy doing there? And you want to be brief and try to sell your experience. You describe highlights from your background that would be of interest to the organization. Focus on skills, activities, and accomplishments and past experiences. If possible, demonstrate that you know something about the organization and industry field. And that's a big point too. You're attempting to create a match or a notion of fit between their hiring needs and your background, basically. The last paragraph, the outro, what is your plan of action? Close by stating you would like to discuss employment opportunities or other information with them further. You can express your willingness and provide more information. You can state a specific time for following up. You can let them know if you're going to be in the area, if you would like to set up a visit. Thank them for their time and their interest. And if you can, address the cover letter to a specific person. If you don't have the name, call the department or call HR to find out to whom you should address it. And as a last resort, address it to the personnel manager, hiring manager, or recruiting rep. And then name at the bottom. Sincerely, still in school. So cover letters are, I think they're simple, but it's also like important to think of it as an extra opportunity to share more information about why you're a good fit for that role. Some tips and points made by Richard Bowles from What Colors Your Parachute, iconic career development novel, is that your resume, quote unquote, is already online. All this information about you is online. And an employer, if they want to know more about you, they are going to Google you. They're going to look you up. Um, and I thought a really interesting point that he makes in the book is that, well, first you should edit what already exists out there. What profiles do you have? What's on your social media? Make sure it's appropriate. So check all platforms, and your LinkedIn profile should be public. Build your new online profile by developing LinkedIn consistently over time. I'll talk about that a little bit, but the stat that I wanted to say is that by the year 2020, at least 90% of employers will look at your social media presence, and 79% have rejected a candidate on the basis of what they found on applicant's social media profile. So just really be aware of what's out there about you. Be sure to check out your own digital footprint, your own presence. And like I said, developing LinkedIn, without question, LinkedIn remains the most important site for both job seekers and employers. So make sure that if you're not there, you need to join and start developing it. It has excellent search engine optimization, which means your profile page will likely be the first item that appears when anyone searches for your name online. So that helps you get that information up closer to the top, closer to their eyes. LinkedIn gives you a highly visible and completely professional online presence, regardless of whether or not you use other social media. Corporate and agency headhunters search on LinkedIn for what they call passive job seekers. So you might not be looking for work or looking for them specifically, but they could still be looking for you. And LinkedIn isn't a static database. It's a network with over 800 million potential connections. Since 85% of critical jobs are filled by networking of some sort, being highly networked is essential for both job seekers and those seeking them. And lastly, LinkedIn is an excellent research tool for any job seeker. You can check out companies that interest you and discover whether you already know someone who works there. And that would be great if you do. You can sign up for customized email alerts for job openings, search company sites, read their job postings, apply online for openings through LinkedIn with a targeted resume and cover letter, and follow companies you're interested in for any breaking news. And then tips for writing your quote unquote actual resume is what Richard Bowles would say, because he's saying resume in quotation marks in terms of what exists out there online about you. But think about what were you most proud of in your role at an organization? What key projects did you work on? What was your accomplishment in the projects, and what was your role? Who benefited from your work and how? What did you do to increase sales or revenue and bring in new customers, and how did you accomplish that? How did you save money for your organization? Which cost-cutting procedures did you implement? What improvements did you make for the organization or your specific area? What were the key skills you needed to succeed in your role? What were the key personality traits needed to succeed in your role? And what are the keywords for your industry, organization, position, and how can you include those on a resume? Where did you go above and beyond the job description to do something unique, creative, or inventive for that organization? Those are great ways to help you write and develop your actual resume. All right. Well, I believe that brings me to the end. So if you ever have any questions for me, you can follow up with me. cmiller66 at wsu.edu is the easiest way to get in contact with me. And for any global campus student interested in career advising, go ahead and reach out and we can set up some career advising information for you. So thank you so much for watching and have a great one. Take care.